I keep a copy of all my data in the safety.
So, the movie kicks off with a guy named James Harper, who's part of this elite military squad. He's got a peaceful home life with his wife Brienne and their little 8-year-old son, whom he adores. Lately, he's been nursing a messed up knee he hurt while serving in Afghanistan. One day, James gets called in by the higher-ups, only to get hit with some brutal news. He's being medically discharged from the army. No job, no income, and worse, they tell him he won't even get a severance check because all the funds supposedly went into his medical bills. It's a tough blow, and even though James didn't want to walk away from the army, there wasn't much he could do. When he gets home, he tells Brienne the whole deal. No job, no backup cash, and a ton of bills to deal with. He's clearly shaken, not knowing how they'll manage. But Brienne stays calm and tries to comfort him, saying they'll figure things out together. That night, while James is up fixing the roof, Brienne shares some really sad news. His close buddy Mason, who had also been let go from the army recently, had taken his own life. That it's hard. James and Mason had been tight during their service. Brienne scared James might spiral too, but he hugs her tight and promises he'd never abandon his family, especially now. At Mason's funeral the next day, James runs into an old face, Mike, his ex-commanding officer. Mike had been discharged too and had since moved away. They hadn't seen each other in ages, so Mike invites James over for dinner to catch up. Later that evening, James heads to Mike's place. They chat over dinner and end up watching a football game. During the game, Mike casually mentions he's working for a private firm now and making decent money. That definitely grabs James' attention, so he asks Mike if he could help him get in too. With the bills piling up, he's desperate for anything that pays. The very next day, Mike introduces James to his boss, a guy named Rusty. He's the head of the company Mike works for. Before offering him a job, Rusty warns James that their missions are risky and could get dangerous. But given how tight money is, James doesn't hesitate and agrees. Rusty, who used to be in the military too, explains that the company operates with unofficial government backing, so James won't have to worry about legal trouble. Once James is on board, Rusty assigns him his first task: fly to Berlin and keep tabs on a scientist for a few weeks. James returns home and tells Brienne he landed a decent-paying job, but it'll require him to travel abroad for a couple of weeks. She's unsure, but agrees since they really need the money. Soon after, James is off to Berlin and checks into a hotel that Mike arranged. Not long after settling in, a woman named Katia shows up. She works for Rusty too and gives James the lowdown on his mission: spy on a scientist named Salim, who's suspected of working with terrorists to create some sort of deadly bioweapon. That night, James gears up and gets to work. He keeps close watch on Salim, tracking his movements at home and in his lab, collecting as much intel as he can. After several days, Katia sends word. It's time to regroup at their base. At the meeting point, James finds Mike, Katia, and another teammate named Bobby. Mike lays it all out. Salim's building a deadly weapon for terror groups. Their mission is to eliminate him and grab all of his research. The lab's hooked up to a police alert system, though, so they'll need to move quickly and quietly. If things go sideways, there's a backup escape route through the forest and river tunnels. That night, they get everything ready: gear, weapons, the whole lot. When they reach the lab, the crew silently takes out the guards and sneaks inside. They sweep through the place until they find Salim and corner him. Mike orders Bobby to transfer all the research data onto their system while James is told to take Salim out. But Salim starts pleading, saying he's not a terrorist. He's a scientist trying to save lives. He begs James to believe him and even says there's a backup copy of his research stored in a bank, one only his wife can access. James, however, doesn't buy any of it. Without hesitating, he injects Salim with a lethal chemical and finishes the mission. After making sure Salim was no longer alive, James lit up the lab and set things up to make it look like an accident had killed him. But just as he and Mike were about to head out, a couple of police cars pulled up, surrounding them. A gunfight broke out between the cops and Mike's team. Sadly, Katia and Bobby were killed, and Mike got shot in the leg. Seeing how bad things were getting, James picked Mike up and rushed him into the woods. They dove into a river and swam until they reached a hidden tunnel where they could take a breather. Mike was losing a lot of blood, so James had to patch him up quickly and even gave him some of his own blood to keep him alive. Once Mike was stable again, they were ready to return to base. But suddenly, James' old knee injury kicked in and he couldn't walk. He told Mike to go ahead with the research data, and deliver it to Rusty. James said he'd catch up later once his leg was better. Mike agreed but told James to wait for him at a hotel named Salvina. A few hours later, when James could move again, he went to the hotel as planned. Inside the room, he found a passport Mike had left and a note saying he'd be back in 6 hours. James waited and waited, but Mike never showed up. Feeling something wasn't right, he left the hotel and called Rusty to check in. That's when Rusty told him the mission had been exposed and the cops were now hunting them. He also said Mike never made it back with the data, so he figured Mike had died. Rusty asked James to tell him where he was so he could send someone to pick him up. But when the people showed up, James got suspicious. Something didn't feel right, so he didn't go with them. He started to believe Rusty was actually the one behind Mike's disappearance, and he was right. After James walked away, Rusty gave the order to find and kill him. When James heard gunshots, he ran for his life. During the chase, he managed to take down 2 of Rusty's men under a bridge. Before one of them died, James asked who had sent them, and sure enough, it was Rusty. James used the guy's phone to send a fake message to Rusty, making him think James was dead. After escaping, James found a place to hide in an underground subway station. While resting there, he remembered something Salim had said. A backup copy of the research was hidden in a bank vault. The next day, James went to Salim's house and asked his wife to get that data. At first, she refused, but when James threatened her son, she gave in and helped retrieve the file from the bank. With the data in hand, James checked out what Salim had been working on. Turns out, Salim wasn't involved in anything shady. He was just trying to create a vaccine for a deadly virus spreading worldwide. He even wanted to give it away for free to help people. But greedy folks found out about it and wanted to steal it for their own profit. Realizing this, James used the passport Mike gave him and flew back to the US. When he got there, he visited Mike's wife to tell her Mike was gone. But to his shock, Mike was alive. That got James thinking Mike might have teamed up with Rusty to get rid of him. The next morning, James followed Mike from a distance to see what was really going on. But Mike figured out someone was tailing him and ambushed James. When he saw it was James, he was shocked. Rusty had told him James was dead. That's why Mike never came to the hotel and left for the States alone. He insisted he never betrayed James. It was Rusty who lied to both of them and set them up. James almost killed Mike out of anger for not telling him the full truth, especially about Salim's research. But Mike warned James not to go home, saying Rusty would come after his family if he knew James was still alive. That's when James decided the only way out was to eliminate Rusty for good. Mike, feeling bad about everything, agreed to help. That evening, Mike pretended he wanted to meet with Rusty while James snuck in from the back. The two of them went full force, taking out Rusty's men one by one. A huge gunfight followed. In the end, Rusty and Mike both shot each other. As Rusty lay dying, James walked over and punched him in the face without saying a thing. James tried to rush Mike to the hospital, but Mike didn't make it. He died from his injuries on the way. The next day, James burned Mike's body along with the car to erase any trace. Then, he finally went home to see his wife and kid. After reuniting with them, James made up his mind to leave the country with his family and start over somewhere new.